Last time I was talking about intimacy, beginning to, whether that's in our sexual relationships or just those which are more emotionally intense, maybe deeper, more meaningful for us. And the question of hurting others, feeling hurt ourselves comes up. And I think that's a really interesting one because, one of the basic points is that it's only really our sense of our own hurt, our own experience of suffering, that really gives us the ability to understand, experience with, share, empathy, the experience of other people's suffering. Empathy is a difficult word. I know that my teacher, Barry Magid, who's a psychoanalyst, his tradition has a very specific meaning of empathy, which is not that kind of immediate feeling with, in a sense, as it's using my smarts to work out how the person that I'm working with feels, what they might be experiencing, how to feel it from their point of view. What I'm talking about is something different, much more immediate, I think. Feeling with. And actually there's the old meaning of the word sympathy in English, which I always like the image of when you hit a key on a piano and you've got the dampers off, or you pluck a guitar string. All the other strings which have the same harmonic resonance. So that's the octaves, fifths, fourths, and each time the relationship is more distant, so the response is quieter. They all resonate, they all vibrate, they all sound in sympathy. But differently, they have their own complex mix of harmonics. It's not the same, but it's a response. It's an immediate, intuitive response. And I think a sense of feeling with, this is the basis of our resonating with others. And that we only have this capacity, and it's huge, it's essential to being human because of our own experience of suffering. Feeling with. Yeah, and if we're saying, actually, is feeling our own hurt a practice for me? Is it to help me feel better? Is it to help me achieve closure? Is it about making these things go away, moving beyond? Well, no, it's not actually about any of those things. And if we engage in this practice of feeling our own hurt, probably aren't going to find closure. Probably aren't going to move on. Maybe we'll find some more space. We'll find some more space to hold our sense of hurt. Maybe it will shift. Maybe it will change. Maybe it will transform into something else. Dunno. But that's not the point, because we're practicing together with all beings, for all beings. Practice in this sense is really just about entering fully into the world of beings of which we're a part. I suppose right at the front, say yes. Trigger warning. If we've had deep personal experience of trauma, thinking about any of this stuff, problematic, potentially dangerous. And for the rest of us who've had no real deep experience of trauma, it's still difficult. Joko Beck talks about us not wanting to engage in the practice, not wanting to engage with the practice. And this is a brilliant example of that. Why would we? Why would we want to go there? Our own sense of hurt, being hurt, difficulty, particularly in relationships which are important to us, which have left us potentially damaged in minor or major ways. So if we're going to do any of this work, then it's important that we approach it in the right way, for our own safety, for the safety of others around us, and to actually be able to do any of this work. Kindness to ourselves and others is always essential, and groundedness, and endlessly reiterate that this is a body practice, and the basis of our practice is always being here, this moment, this body being this body. And so rather than emphasize the thinking element, it's emphasizing much more the feeling, the experience, the being, whatever this experience is, right here, right now. And that may be the tightness in the chest, it may be the tears, it may be the anger, it may be pain in the neck, it may be the knot in my stomach, it may be all of these or none of these, or a feeling of emptiness, a feeling of lack. But the essential part is staying grounded, staying present. And it may be that I need to give myself cues while I'm staying present. Keeping the ability literally to focus on something. Keeping the sense of now, keeping the sense of here, and keeping above all the sense of this body as it is in this moment. The weight of me on the cushion. The feeling of my limbs depending from my skeleton. How things connect up. All the things which we should be at some level aware of when we're sitting anywhere, and certainly in walking meditation. And actually, if we're talking about ways of staying engaged, staying safe, walking meditation is wonderful. It's fantastic. The regular coordination of stepping and breathing, the complex sensations of a moving body. Fantastic way of staying grounded and present. And the danger with any of this kind of practice, which we may do intentionally, unintentionally, is always overwhelm. Coming to a place where there's just too much. And rather than being able to experience what's happening in this body, push back. Might become hyper-aroused, whatever. And so kindness and self-awareness, and this is after all an awareness practice, so being aware of where my emotions are, being aware of the state of my arousal is a part of this. Feeling the resistance, backing off, feeling the resistance, backing off. And backing off might be returning to my point of focus. It might be getting up, walking around. It might be doing walking meditation. It might be making a cup of tea. It might be whatever. I don't know why I'm spending way too much time on this, but it seems really important because this is what our practice is. Practice takes us, whether we're intending to or not, to sometimes places which are difficult, places which are awkward. The areas of our experience, of our life as it is, where we don't want to go, where we don't want to be. And of course we should never force ourselves, never push too hard. Always counterproductive. as I said, we don't want to go there. We don't want to feel our own sense of hurt in relationship. Certainly we normally don't. And I think we can relate this obviously very strongly to our sense of vulnerability that, at the end of the day, who wants to feel vulnerable? And certainly if we're going to use the other V word, victim, who wants to feel like a victim? And we're told that, feeling like a victim is actually very bad for us. So anything which points us at our lack of control, and this is the big point really, is that life, the reality of life as it is always pointing out the limits to this fantasy sense of control, which we either do feel or feel cheated out of by events. And what do we do when we feel vulnerable? What do we do when we feel lack of control? We maybe dissociate, maybe distract ourselves, or maybe, we do a bit of both by telling stories. And we can tell stories of blame. We can tell stories of our own guilt, because both of these in their way are ways of trying to regain control. It wasn't my vulnerability, my lack of control, it was your badness. Or alternatively, no, I brought this on myself. I did it. I made the decision that led to my own hurt. I'm back in control. Actually, there are even practices within the Tibetan tradition that use that as a positive idea. Take control by claiming your victimhood, your guilt. Certainly not saying that. We're not trying to do anything. We're always just being aware. Look, I'm telling a story about your badness. Look, I'm telling a story about my guilt. That's interesting, isn't it? I'm doing it again. And as we always say, in this sense, non-judgmentally. Oh, look. Fancy that. Again. Hello, old friend guilt. Hello, old friend blame. Yeah. And we just return. And these story cycles, they're just part of the way we work. And they're endless. And we can call them rumination. We can call them prapancha. We can point out they never really get us anywhere. But they're part of what we do. Part of our just state of delusion, because by telling stories we can always avoid the pain, we can always avoid the actual experiencing. And if there's stories that make me feel angry or stories that make me feel miserable, so much the better. I've got some good solid emotion which I can dodge what I don't want to feel. And where might our experiencing this actual sense of hurt take us? Obviously it might be to any kind of pain. It might well be to fear. It might be to the anger which we're always pushing fear off into. It might well be shame, and shame really needs a special shout out in terms of our intimate relationships, because so much shaming is, specifically sexually based. And this is where perhaps especially we don't want to feel that vulnerability, because our intimate relationships, our sexual relationships, they're in some ways what we feel is the core of ourselves. And whether that's an appropriate feeling or not, we can talk about in a different context, but that's what we seem to do, and this makes us particularly vulnerable here. And if we are particularly vulnerable, we're going to be particularly inclined to push back against this, to dodge, to evade. Can I just actually sit there experiencing what I'm experiencing? And if I'm talking about shaming, well, what kind of things might make me experience that? Well, things people have said. Banter, remarks, more generally catcalling, so many different contexts. Or it might be invoking my own assumptions, my own beliefs, and the question is always, well, yeah? Why do you think that? Why do I really think that? Do I really think that? But I can still feel the hurt of, well, it should have been this way. I was expecting this, or I thought I should do that, and I went horribly wrong. And so much of our sense of hurt can, at one level, simply be through mismatch. We wanted different things. We didn't understand we weren't coming from the same place. Do we need to find blame here? Probably not. It's complicated. So often it's complicated. That sounds good and non-judgmental, and we'll come back to that. So it may well be that nobody's actually done anything wrong here, but it's just difficult. It's just a difficult place that I found myself in. Or we may feel, well, actually, I've not really been hurt myself at all. I can see dreadful things happen in personal relationships. Actually, maybe my own behaviour's been not of the best from time to time, but I don't think I've really experienced any sense of hurt. Maybe you're lucky. Maybe you're really lucky, because if we're honest, how many of us haven't? Can I actually really... Please not even be sure about that, is it? It's just, what am I hiding from myself? I don't have to go digging, and maybe it is that simple for me now. Maybe tomorrow I'll turn around and realize, oh, heavens. Yeah, actually. We're all hugely likely to fall foul of. And what am I talking about again? Well, probably assumptions, expectations, stories about how it should be, how it shouldn't be, whether those are mine, person I'm in relationship with, those that seem to just float around in the ether. So we experience the contradictions of the world. And it can feel like a fly being swatted. Or maybe there's something different again. Well, let's think about this. Let's think about when things don't work as we'd like them to. Or maybe... Well, where I'm going with this is, it's a few years now since #MeToo. It's a few years since we really started to develop a better awareness as a society of things like street harassment. Not that this is just something that happens. And the publicity, the increasing public awareness, just like when somebody, well, obviously the key example in the UK would be somebody like Jimmy Savile. Lovely, 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 until actually some people put their hand up and said, this happened, and then suddenly we find, well, actually, yes, me too, me too, me too, me too. And the specific context, though not the origin, that Me Too became known for was obviously goings on with women actors in Hollywood and the trials and tribulations of actually trying to maintain some kind of personal, emotional and physical integrity in a very difficult, male-dominated, patronage-based industry. We know that now. But just the sense that one might genuinely realise oneself years later, years after the event, that no, actually, that wasn't okay. Actually, I've been holding this at a distance, and that realisation itself is bound to be difficult, bound to be, in a major or minor sense, actively traumatic. But no, I can now name this. That was not acceptable. And whether that's actual rape that we're talking about or something lesser in a sense, still no. And this is where our non-judgmental attitude, well, at one level I can be non-judgmental. Look, this is the situation. This is how I feel about it. That doesn't preclude, it doesn't negate the importance of actually naming, and whether that's a private naming for my own purposes, or whether that's a public naming, even a police prosecution. A non-judgmental attitude should never negate that. Or something, supposedly, well, in one sense, obviously lesser. Say about street harassment. Good few years ago now, but my daughters as teenagers were lucky enough to be able to walk to school. Fine, great, important part of engaging with the world. Except I didn't know at the time that there's this, not even a particularly seedy pub, but pub walking early in the morning. For some reason, early in the morning, there are already guys outside there, sat having a smoke, and a pint, whatever, maybe with a dog. And as the schoolgirls walk past, they pass remarks. How do you respond to that? Is that just what happens, or is that actively wrong? Still makes me angry to think about that. Still makes me angry to think about not knowing. So, judgmental, non-judgmental, non-judgmental. But we still name what needs naming, and if appropriate, we need to. We take response. But most of the time, it is more complicated, and maybe we don't need to go in the direction of blame. Maybe we can lay out just the physical response, the feelings, the pain in my neck, the knot in my stomach, the feeling of, well, whatever. And we do this with care. We do this as care. And hopefully we find not closure, not magicking away, not an end to suffering, but space to hold whatever it is we need to hold. And that this is self-care. But in this sense, it's self-care which allows us to open outwards towards the world, to open out towards the other. There's a beautiful image, actually, which Barry uses in Ending the Pursuit of Suffering, which is just kiss it better. It's just talking about the child falls over in the playground, small child, not embarrassed by its parents yet. Small child falls over in the playground, skins her knee. Mummy will kiss it better. Which of course she does. Not by transforming it, not by zzz, and suddenly the skin's healed, but by changing the meaning of that hurt, changing the context of that hurt, changing the way that her child thinks and experiences that hurt, making space for the hurt. This isn't trauma, this isn't the end, this isn't personal failing, this is just life. And in life we care. We care for each other. We care for ourselves. This isn't an order to go out and experience your bad things. Heaven forfend that. But it's just that it absolutely is our own experience of suffering which allows us to open out to the world. Thich Nhat Hanh always said he wouldn't want to live in a world which didn't include suffering. And you can talk about, oh yes, we need light and shade. But I think it's more fundamental than that. If I want to be human, then I need to be human, and we are sentient beings, we are suffering beings. We don't need to hide from that. There's quite enough suffering to go around, we don't need to go looking for it. But it's our own experience that allows us to turn outwards towards the other, to share this life, to share this world. But be kind. Always be kind.